Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. The small town of Willow Creek, nestled in a valley, enveloped by towering pines and the lingering aroma of earth after rain. Its charm was undeniable: quaint houses with picket fences, the local diner serving comfort food on mismatched plates, and the gentle river that wound its way through the landscape, glistening under the sun. But beneath this picturesque facade lay an unshakable tension. It was a community with secrets waiting to spill. On a misty Monday morning in mid-October, the serenity was shattered. The sun peeked hesitantly over the horizon, illuminating the dense fog that lingered like a restless ghost. Whispers of dread began to snake through the streets, word racing ahead of the news that would soon devastate the town. A young woman, Samantha Reed, the beloved daughter of the local librarian, had vanished without a trace. It wasn't like her. Friends spoke of her devotion to her job at the elementary school, recalling her infectious laughter and kindness. A diligent planner, Samantha had always informed her parents of her whereabouts. The void she left behind grew heavier as hours turned to days, each tick of the clock amplifying the concern etched into the faces of her loved ones. By the end of that week, search parties combed the surrounding woods with a sense of desperate hope, while investigators canvassed the peaceful streets. Each passerby felt the weight of dread who would want to harm Samantha. As police interviews began, the reality of the investigation illustrated a grim portrait of a community, discovering that dark undercurrents often run beneath still waters, waiting for the unassuming to disturb their surface. The case would soon spiral into a winding labyrinth of suspicion, secrets, and ultimately, the harrowing truth. The victim. Samantha Reed was not just a name on missing person posters. She was a vibrant thread woven into the fabric of Willow Creek. Born and raised in the town, she embodied its spirit, warm, approachable, and endlessly curious. At home, her parents fostered a love for reading, helping to shape her into the compassionate soul everyone came to adore. Friends described her as a natural caretaker, always finding time to help others. Whether it was tutoring students struggling in school, volunteering at local charity drives. At 25, Samantha had carved out a life filled with purpose. Her days revolved around teaching fourth graders at the elementary school, where her infectious smile could light up the dullest afternoon. Her students were her pride, and she often spoke of their small victories with gleaming eyes, lovingly sharing their artwork and anecdotes with anyone willing to listen. But the weeks leading up to her disappearance told a different story. Whispers began to circulate about a troubling situation in her personal life. Samantha's close friends noted she had become more withdrawn, her laughter occasionally replaced by moments of pensive silence. They sensed that something lurked beneath her surface, a tension that lay unspoken, shrouded in the shadow of unanswered question. Her best friend, Lily, recalled a late-night conversation over mugs of tea, where Samantha hesitated before revealing that someone had been following her, commenting on her every move. At first, Lily brushed it off as a figment of imagination and overactive mind, but as Samantha's anxiety crept in, the reality became unmistakable. Just days before her disappearance, Samantha confided in Lily that she was planning to confront the person who had been unsettling her. He was that moment between fear and empowerment that created an unshakable bond of concern for his safety. As investigators probed deeper into her life, it became clear that peeling back the layers of Samantha's world would reveal a haunting trajectory. One that extended far beyond line bound deep darkness. The crime scene. The thick fog hung heavy on the morning of October 20th as investigators convened just outside the edges of Willow Creek, the trees standing sentinel like mourners at a silent funeral. The distraction of nature's beauty offered no solace as Sheriff David Harmon arrived at the location where Samantha Reed's body had been discovered, a secluded ravine, hidden away from the main roads, yet familiar enough to anyone who knew the wood. A sense of grave unease crept into his stomach. No sheriff ever hoped to confront such a tragedy. The methodical cadence of footsteps echoed among the trees as forensic teams maneuvered around the scene, their sullen faces bathed in the early light. The soft crunch of leaves underfoot resonated like muffled whispers, heightening the tension that clung to the air. Sheriff Harmon motioned for a technician to approach, keen on gathering critical details. "What do we have?" he asked, his voice steady, yet laced with an undercurrent of disbelief. The technician gestured towards a rusted bike nearby, nestled amidst the underbrush. Samantha's bike, Sheriff. The orange color is unmistakable. Discarded. It lay forgotten, the last remnant of a young woman's freedom, now entwined with the darkest chapter of your life. As investigators cataloged the scene, a grim clarity began to unfold. Samantha's body rested in a shallow grave, partially obscured by dirt and foliage, her once vibrant presence erased. A thin, frayed rope was discovered near the site, raising alarming questions about the method of her demise. Evidence markers were placed carefully around the area, while the sun broke through the clouds, casting stark shadows as if nature itself mourned. Bits of fabric from her clothing snagged on branches whispered tales of struggle and betrayal. As the coroner began the preliminary examination, Sheriff Harmon felt that familiar weight settle on his shoulders. Samantha's loss echoed through the community, stretching beyond this secluded place, a poignant reminder that the woods, which had offered safety and serenity, could also hide darkness beyond measure. Each piece of evidence would unravel a story fallible and complex, challenging the town's perception of innocence and plunging them into a search for answers that had begun with an anguished sigh, but would culminate in an unforgiving confrontation with reality. The early investigation. The following days unfolded like a relentless storm, shadows looming over Willow Creek as the investigation into Samantha Reed's death gained moment. Sheriff David Harmon convened a meeting with his team in the dimly lit back room of the station, the faint hum of fluorescent lights barely masking the growing restlessness in the air. The case was soon assigned to Detective Claire Lawrence, a seasoned investigator with an uncanny ability to decipher lives fractured by tragedy. "We need to prioritize her last known movements," Detective Lawrence began, her voice calm yet commanding. "Let's pull all available security footage around town, especially near the school and her home." The team rallied behind her, though a heavy silence filled the room, a palpable reminder that their efforts would be scrutinized at every turn. Hours turned into days as they sifted through grainy footage from convenience stores, gas stations, and street chorus. A meticulous timeline of Samantha's last known activities began to emerge, a tapestry woven with anxious moments and fleeting interaction. It became increasingly clear that she had been approached by unknown figures in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. A man, tall and scruffy, loitered near the school playground, his presence unsettling yet imperceptible to those preoccupied with daily life. As the investigation deepened, the detectives turned to Samantha's friends and family. One evening, Claire met with Lily at the local cafe, where murmurs of apprehension filled the air among worried patrons. "I just want to understand who would do this," Vinny said, her voice trembling. Samantha was good to everyone. There had to be someone with a grudge, someone jealous. With each interview, patterns began to surface. In the wake of Samantha's death, those with troubled pasts or secret obsessions came into sharp focus. The once idyllic charm of Willow Creek had cracked, revealing buried resentments and conflicted loyalties. Claire documented each lead with precision, cross-referencing names and motives, fueled by the need for justice that echoed among the community. Yet, with every lead they pursued, the tangled web of individuals around Samantha revealed complexities that only deepened the mystery. As whispers of jealousy and infatuation hung in the air, the detectives prepared themselves to confront a sinister truth. Sometimes, the darkness that seeks to harm resides much closer than one could dare to imagine. The dead ends. Days blurred into nights as the investigation crawled onward, each sunrise a stark reminder of the haunting void left in the wake of Samantha Reed's death. Sheriff Harmon paced the office, frustration simmering just below the surface. Despite their diligent work, the tides of fortune felt unyieldingly low. Leads that once shimmered with promise repeatedly turned to dust as hope dwindled like autumn leaves falling from the trees. Detective Claire Lawrence had followed every lead diligently, but several promising avenues had fizzled with disappointing clarity. The tall man seen lingering near the school had vanished into thin air, leaving only fragmented witness reports that varied wildly in description. Meanwhile, the fabric of Lily's testimonies held together, yet they offered no substantial evidence. As the days turned to weeks, the once lively conversations at the cafe became quieter. Murmurs fading into silence as despair settled over the tight-knit community. One afternoon, Claire interviewed another local shopkeeper who claimed to have seen Samantha arguing with an unnamed man several weeks before her disappearance. He had dark hair. "I remember that much," the shopkeeper recalled, wringing his hands nervously. "And if you ask me, it was nothing more than a lover's." Claire's heart sank too many times had she encountered the illusory mirage of passion, twisted into violence. Yet this lead, too, fizzled out as friends corroborated the encounter as playful banter, rather than hostility. Despite their tireless pursuit, the investigators found themselves grappling with an unsettling pattern of non-cooperation. Some locals chose to remain tight-lipped, unwilling to confront the demons lurking in their community. Those who did speak offered a parade of contradictions that led investigators in circles, deepening the sense of hopelessness. Even Samantha's closest friends, once eager to share their insights, began to harbor doubt. "What if I'm overlooking something vital?" Lily pondered, her face pale with guilt as she met with Claire one evening. Yet there was little time for self-play. The scent of deadlines loomed, raising tensions between the sheriff's department and the press, eager for any developments to help paint a picture for a community desperate for reassurance. Each dead end reinforced a collective dread, the knowledge that justice was slipping through their fingers. With every life unraveling under scrutiny, they stood on the precipice of despair, feeling time fold in on itself like a dark ocean, each wave bringing them closer to the unsettling reality that sometimes the answers feel just out of reach, needing only shattered expectations behind. A break in the case. Just when the investigation into Samantha Reed's death felt mired in hopelessness, a flicker of change lit the horizon. On a cold November morning, Detective Claire Lawrence prepared for another day of routine follow-ups. Her heart heavy with the burden of unanswered questions. As she sipped her lukewarm coffee, her phone buzzed violently against the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Officer Martinez, breathless on the line. "Detective, we've got a hit," he said, urgency laden in his voice. A delivery truck driver spotted someone matching the tall man's description, leaving the area the night Samantha went missing. All on the outskirts of town, near Old Mill Road. They told me he was acting strange, almost like he didn't want to be seen. Claire's pulse quickened. "Have you got a location?" As she rushed to the scene, hope surged alongside adrenaline. Old Mill Road was a desolate stretch where tall grass intertwined with crumbling asphalt. Wind whistled through the barren trees, creating an expectant silence that seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. By the time she arrived, the area held a mix of excitement and tension. Officers stationed around the entrance began canvassing the vicinity, while Martinez relayed the driver's account. He said the man and disappeared into the woods shortly after sun. "We found a partial shoe print leading into the brush," Martinez explained, his optimism infectious. Claire's heart raced. Every instinct told her this was significant. Following them, a footprints deeper into the woods led them to a clearing littered with suspicious debris. Broken branches strewn about like discarded hopes. The air felt thick, charged with tension. "Photograph everything," Clara commanded as they scoured the terrain, determination anchoring her as a team member. Unearthed a small piece of fabric, snagged on a thorny bush. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to have the same orange hue as Samantha's bike. A wave of unease washed over the gathered officers, stirring old fears back to life. "If this belongs to her," Claire murmured, her voice trailing off. The world around her felt muted as the implications settled in. They had unearthed evidence, a tangible link to the struggle that had ended in tragedy. As they began to piece together new potential leads, it felt as if the investigation was shifting from a lingering haze to a clearer focus. Even as the sun dipped behind the canopy, casting long shadows against the ground, renewed energy surged through Claire and her team. For the first time in weeks, the trail felt alive, like a thread tied taut between past horror and the hope for resolution. As they tread cautiously through the underbrush, they understood. They were not merely searching for answers anymore. They were on the cusp of unveiling the truth shrouded in darkness. The suspect. With the discovery of the fabric fragment, the atmosphere around the Willow Creek Sheriff's Department shifted from despair to a cautious expectancy. Detective Claire Lawrence pored over the notes from previous interviews, her mind racing as she correlated the new evidence to Samantha Reed's life. The tall man seen near the school now held a new significance, transforming from a mere shadow in the background into a potential threat. In the days that followed, Claire and her team concentrated their efforts on identifying this elusive figure. With the aid of several witnesses, they crafted a description that depicted a man in his 30s, unkempt with a scruffy beard and a noticeable tattoo on his arm. Through a series of leads, they culminated in a narrow list of suspects, with one name rising to the surface: Jacob Reed, a troubled acquaintance of Samantha. The coincidence of the last name raised a haunting question: was he a distant relative, or a dangerous coincidence? Jacob was known for his history of aggression. Various confrontations around town painted a portrait of a man struggling with demons, possibly tied to unrequited infatuation. The more Claire delved, the more troubling connections surfaced. Administratively, Jacob had been seen lingering around the school perimeter during Samantha's last day sightings, dismissed previously resonated with chilling clarity. One early afternoon, Claire gathered her team and formulated a plan to confront Jacob. She felt a sense of foreboding creep in, recognizing the complex motives that often governed human behavior. As they pulled up to his dilapidated trailer on the outskirts of town, the air grew heavy with uncertainty. The peeling paint and cluttered yard felt strangely emblematic of a life spiraling out of control. Detective Lawrence knocked firmly on the door, her heart pounding as the seconds stretched long. When the door swung open, Jacob appeared, a disheveled shadow brimming with disbelief. Visible nervousness etched across his face. "Jacob Reed?" Claire inquired, her voice steady yet authoritative. He nodded absently, eyes darting anxiously, a tell that sparked her instincts. "We need to talk about Samantha." Immediately, his expression shifted. "I don't know anything. I swear," he blurted, a veneer of desperation veiling his demeanor. Claire observed him closely. His fidgeting, the erratic gestures, each element painted a picture so stark it almost felt surreal. As they moved into the cramped living area, Claire inched forward, honing in on his verbal dissonance. His denial echoed hollow, resonating with the panic of a man caught in the web of his own choice. The conversation turned deeper, exploring his whereabouts on the night Samantha disappeared. And while he attempted to dismiss the facts, Claire could sense the tension lying below the surface. "Witnesses saw you near the school, Jacob." She leaned forward, her voice low, bordering on an accusation. "What were you doing there?" Jacob squirmed, the walls closing in as she allowed a moment of silence to fall between them. The way he looked down, avoiding her gaze, was telling. Claire clenched her fists, understanding that beneath his thin facade lay the truth they had been seeking. As Jacob's story began to unravel, the weight of suspicion settled heavily upon him. With no solid alibi in his past behavior, suddenly illuminated by the context of grief, it became increasingly clear that he was more than just a witness. She was on the precipice of becoming the primary suspect in Samantha Reed's tragic story. The trial. The courthouse loomed imposing against the steel blue sky, casting long shadows over the assembled crowd. A microcosm of a community, gripped by tragedy and anticipation. After months of investigation and heartbreak, the trial of Jacob Reed was finally set to commence. The atmosphere buzzed with an undercurrent of tension. The people of Willow Creek had shown up not just for justice, but to confront the haunting specter of their own fears. Inside the courtroom, it buzzed with emotion, every seat filled with concerned faces, eager to witness the proceedings that revolved around Samantha Reed's death. There Lauren sat with the prosecution team, her heart racing as she reviewed her notes one last time. Jacob Reed, now a shadow of his former self, sat at the defendant's table, his demeanor a blend of defiance and dread. But beneath that surface, she sensed an unraveling man whose tangled decisions had led him to this moment. As the trial began, the prosecution painted a vivid portrayal of the events leading up to Samantha's disappearance. Key witnesses testified about the interactions they had with Jacob, each recounting their observations with chilling consistency. Claire amended the police report's lurking presence, the desperate energy fueled by unreciprocated feelings. Each voice added weight to the narrative, stitching together a timeline that elevated the prosecutorial case from speculation to a poignant reality. The defense, on the other hand, leaned heavily on the idea that Jacob was a scapegoat, a convenient target for a grief-stricken community looking for answers. They aired his troubled past, arguing that his demeanor and so-called obsession with Samantha didn't equate to guilt. The courtroom gasped as they called up character witnesses, who painted Jacob as a victim of circumstance rather than malice, clouding the truth with a shroud of sympathy. Claire felt a rush of frustration as she watched him manipulate perceptions, the very act of denial stirring the room again. But she remained steadfast, her resolve bolstered by the memories of Samantha's joy, the laughter now silenced. It was not just the memory of the woman who had vanished that hung over the proceedings. It was the harsh reality that Jacob had been privy to a tragic series of events that stripped a vibrant life from the world. The trial progressed, and as the prosecution's case wound closer to its climax, the tide began to turn. Forensic evidence from the scene was introduced, said an analysis that linked Jacob to certain aspects of the crime, corroborating the timeline with tangible proof. Eyes widened in the courtroom as the connection crystallized. A clear narrative of possession and intent began to emerge. On the final day of testimony, Claire delivered her closing arguments with palpable emotion. Samantha Reed was loved by her family, her friends, the students whose lives she touched. Jacob Reed's actions robbed her of the future she deserved. We owe it to her memory to seek justice. Her words reverberated through the chamber like a lighthouse cutting through fog, illuminating the sea of uncertainty that had shrouded Willow Creek. As deliberations began, the tension reached a fever pitch. The jury returned after what felt like an eternity, and silence fell like a shroud as the foreperson rose. We find the defendant, Jacob Reed, guilty of second-degree murder. A collective sigh escaped the crowd, mingling with the echoes of relief and sorrow. Though justice had been served, an enduring emptiness remained. As Claire exited the courthouse, she felt a bittersweet weight lifting from her shoulders, yet the loss of Samantha resurged, carving a reminder in the hearts of all those gathered justice could be a victory. But it was also a reminder of the fragility of life. Out among the crowd, whispers of closure mingled with an understanding that in a town like Willow Creek, the scars of loss would linger, shaped by both the memories of a vibrant life lost and the weight of a truth finally unbaked. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, Willow Creek attempted to stitch itself back together. Yet an undercurrent of sorrow persisted, woven deeply into the community's fabric. Jacob Reed's conviction had brought a measure of justice to Samantha's loved ones, but the echoes of loss resonated long after the gavel fell. A haunting reminder of a life neither simple nor just. Detective Claire Lawrence found herself grappling with her own sense of closure. As she sat in her modest living room, the weight of the case still clung to her like a shroud. obstructing the lightness she yearned for, gone with the moments of celebration. Instead, her mind replayed the investigation in a relentless loop, clinging to every detail, every decision made in the pursuit of truth. He would take time to settle into peace, she reminded herself, but even that thought felt fragile. Meanwhile, the town gathered for a memorial service to honor Samantha Reed. Held at the local community center, the event brimmed with an outpouring of grief, intermingled with celebration. Friends and family converged, sharing photos and stories that illuminated the woman they loved, each anecdote of thread weaving together her legacy, ensuring she would not be forgotten. Laughter mixed with tears as their students released paper lanterns into the evening sky, symbols of hope and remembrance that floated gently, illuminating the darkness. Amidst the mourning, the librarian, Mrs. Reed, stood stoic at the front of the room, her gaze steadied by resolve. When the time came to speak, her voice trembled momentarily, but she filled the space with an unwavering love for her daughter. Samantha brought joy to everyone she met, she said, steadying herself against the microphone. We cannot allow this tragedy to define us. We need to carry her light forward, to honor the kindness she embodied in every act. As candles flickered in the gathering dust, Claire watched the town's resilience manifest, unity binding them against the persistent threats of darkness that had infiltrated their lives. It marked a turning point. Willow Creek shifted slowly, cautiously. Conversations about safety burgeoned into policy discussions, whereas mistrust morphed into conversations of community involvement. Neighborhood patrols were formed, potential hazards identified, and the sheriff's department saw renewed support from citizens eager to reclaim their sense of control. Yet, the real impact was felt in the whispers of vulnerability that threaded their way through the community. A newfound awareness began to bloom, a recognition that safety is an ongoing endeavor that requires vigilance, dialogue. While they could never forget the darkness that had enveloped their world, they now bore the resilience to confront it. As Claire returned to her daily routine, answering calls and mentoring younger detectives, she sought solace in the connections forged through shared grief. Each case that followed carried echoes of the past, but intertwined in those echoes was the knowledge that a community could rally ever stronger in the face of adversity. Though Samantha's loss reverberated throughout Willow Creek, her legacy remained alive. It rippled through acts of kindness, community efforts, and in each heart that remembered. Life is fleeting, but love and connection endure. In the aftermath of tragedy, perhaps that was the greatest lesson learned, that in vulnerability lies strength, and in loss, the relentless pursuit of hope can illuminate even the darkest of paths. Reflection. As the seasons shifted from autumn to winter, Claire Lawrence found herself frequently visiting the riverbank just outside of Willow Creek, a place where the water flowed steadily and life seemed to pulse in tandem with her own thoughts. It became a refuge, a quiet expanse to reflect on everything that had transpired. Each visit drew her deeper into contemplation, a grappling with the layers of grief, justice, and healing that had unfolded in the... Sitting on a weathered log, Claire gazed into the river, its surface mirroring the clouds like a canvas of shifting emotions. Samantha's laughter echoed in her memory, remnants of the vibrant woman she had fought to protect. There was solace and heartache in recognizing that while justice had been served, it felt akin to patching a stunning tapestry with a single thread. The beauty of Samantha's life was rich, messy and irrevocably altered by the hand that had caused her untimely demise.